Welcome, everyone. My name is Joanne, and I'm a community admin in the Maintenance Community Slack group with a community of over 3,700 maintenance and reliability professionals. Welcome to the 2021 Virtual Career Development Fair. We have for you guys a leadership panel, Unlock Your Full Potential, and we have our very amazing panelists, Rob, Charlie, Garrett, and Brian. I'm very happy to announce that we have some amazing influential leaders on our panel today. I'm sure you've seen them all around the community, LinkedIn. They have a very huge presence in the industry. So I'm very appreciative of our panelists taking their time to discuss everything leadership today. But before I hand it off to our panelists, I just have a couple things to note for our attendees. You'll notice that you're muted right now. You'll have the capability of chatting in the right side chat box. And you'll see a section where you can submit any questions you might have for our panelists throughout the webinar. So we'll try our best to kind of go over as many questions as you have at the very end. I'll also be releasing a few polls during the discussion. So just be on the lookout for those. So yeah, let's get started. We're going to go around and just start to introduce ourselves and share a little bit about your leadership journey. So we'll start with Rob and then go from Garrett, Charlie, and Brian. So yeah, let's get started.
Hey guys, hey everyone, I'm Rob Kalwarowski. So I guess most of you may have known me or see me on LinkedIn all the time. But yeah, so currently right now I work as an asset class manager at Enbridge Pipelines, but I also do consulting and have some leadership stuff on the side. In terms of a little bit about what I do, mostly you'll probably know me from host of the Maintenance Disrupted podcast, which I've just recently turned over, but now I have two new podcasts. The first one, Dismantling the High Performance Narrative, about mental health and performance. And then we launched the Leadership Launchpad Project podcast about 3-4 weeks ago about what we're going to talk about today. And the rest of the panelists here today were part of the Leadership Launchpad Project program, which we ran in September. So it's pretty awesome that they're all here and they're all, well, Dylan, we're missing Dylan, but the rest of us are here and we're here to change the world. So Garrett, here you go.
All right, so obviously I'm Garrett Earl, and I'm the reliability engineer with Cargill. I guess in terms of like the leadership stuff, I'm probably the youngest or newest on this leadership journey here. And I guess like first starting out, I would have had it kind of started out with it through playing competitive sports, is how I kind of got introduced to it. And then in university, I kind of got involved with doing some coaching, and then also starting kind of a student group that was centered around kind of school pride. And then once I got out of school, I quickly got promoted into a maintenance supervisor role. So kind of got thrown in and had to learn what leadership was all about. And then since then, I've moved into the reliability engineering role that I'm in now.
Well, I'm Charlie Matthews. I am the founder and CEO of Empowering Brands. And I am a mom. I have 3 kids. I'm a wife, and I co-own Empowering Brands, a media company empowering pumps and equipment and empowering women in industry conference and events. Also, I'm a host of a podcast called Empowering Industry Podcast. I've had Rob on my podcast, which is really fun. And, you know, I try to think about this and kind of where I started. And I think with this space, I would say teaching the industry social media in this space before it ever existed. So 10 years ago is when I started my company. I would say that is where my leadership came in, because I had to learn, you know, how do I talk about a digital space, social media within this very industrial, technical, male-dominated space. So that's my introduction.
Awesome. So my name is Brian Bieshke. I am the Director of Maintenance and Reliability for T. Parker Host, or Host Terminals. I say this to everybody. I started out as a mechanic. I've been a wrench turner my entire life, and I can still consider myself a wrench turner, although I am in a leadership role currently. So leadership for me started in the military for sure. being a GSE troubleshooter on the flight deck of the USS George Washington aircraft carrier, being responsible for the safety, training, well-being, and efficiency of technicians and personnel in high-stress environments. And I quickly learned that being really good and smart at your job didn't really mean anything if the people around you and with you were not equal to or better than you in their role. And the subject matter expert thing quickly turned to making sure that humans in general were taken care of as humans in general, which fostered much more performance and efficiency and better well-being than ever could be expected with just driving production. So currently in Host, I oversee the maintenance programs across the country, aligning them with our ever-changing business objectives. But I am a human-centric person from start to finish, and people are everything and they achieve everything. So that's why I really wanted to be a part of this. And I've been on Rob's podcast. We connected over the same thoughts and human-centric leadership. I've been to the Center for Creative Leadership LDP program, which is a week-long in Colorado Springs. I've been on Rob's leadership launchpad project, which really helped me with some personal things that I had to overcome to be a better leader. So yeah, we have an awesome panel, and thank you for having me.
Awesome. Those are all amazing accomplishments. I feel like everyone here has a podcast, so I'll definitely link it in the chat so that people can take a look. But let's start with our first question. In your perspectives, how do you define leadership, and what qualities would make an exceptional leader? And at what point in your life did you see those qualities in yourself? And we can go in the same order.
Yeah, so for me, it's funny, right? Because I think one of the later questions we have is like, talks about leadership roles. And where I sit with this question is it's and this, I'll read you this quote from Simon Sinek, but he says leadership is a choice, not a rank. And I think that's where I sit with leadership. It's leadership to me, it's about accountability for how you show up in the world and what you do, how you impact the people around you, how you grow yourself, and how you show up. And I think like just like coming off what Brian said is a lot of us were trained as like these engineers or these mechanics, and we're fixer people. And we think that, and I get this question a lot, you know, like, how come we're not doing quality maintenance work? And people think the answer to that question is longer procedures, more detail, better processes, better, like all these processes, tools, procedures type of answer. And it's not actually going to work, right? Like if you issue a 500-page job plan to somebody to change an air filter, they're not going to do it more effectively. Like you have to come at it and understand who the person is, why this job is important to them, and really relate to them on that level, so that they can have a conversation with you about what truly is happening, whether that's they don't know, they don't have the proper training to execute the work, they're not given enough time, they don't have the right tool, whatever these things are, there's more there than just adding to a procedure or changing the process. And I think that's where I start with this, is leadership is a choice, and anyone in any organization, even if you're like just at home, maybe you don't have a job, you can be a leader. And you just got to make that choice and step up for the people around you.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Rob's saying there. Is that right? I define it there as that leadership is a skill or kind of quality that anyone can possess, right? And it is about really inspiring and empowering your people to kind of achieve their goals, right? And what they want to do. And like I often, when I think about it and I try to define it, is I just think of like some of the great leaders that I've been around. And I know when we've talked in the podcast is that I feel like when you get to experience this, and I'm sure you'll see it a little later when all these guys talk about why they do it, is when you're around these people and these leaders, is you just get this feeling of just feeling inspired, is how I would describe it, right? And it's just in the way that they carry themselves and bring their people up, right? And then in terms of qualities that of like that people have of that is, I think that you'll find that it's just a matter of being respectful, compassionate, right? Just treating everybody like humans, right? At the end of the day, everyone's coming to do the best job that they can, and if you foster those relationships, that you'll end up doing, just being a leader by just through your natural being, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I'll just comment, I guess Rob had said it's a choice, and I'll just go a little bit further and say it's a responsibility. And I think there's a little bit of a difference because we all want to be leaders, but I think it's very clear when that responsibility kicks in. And I think this is where it changed for me, was when other people were calling me a leader, and I was like, what, a leader? I didn't even see myself as that, as leading others. So I think that responsibility of taking that on and saying, I'm going to do the work to make sure that I know how to be a leader and how to, provide value for others and the skills that I need to be successful. I think that really is what changes it for me versus the choice and responsibility and then how to do it effectively. So.
I love that, Charlie. And for you, like, it was a switch for me, right? And it really changed not only like the content and the stuff that I put out, but it just changed how I show up. And I think, like, for you, like, I can see that too in you, right? And I think it's a huge thing is we sit here, and I think a lot of us feel, and this is what I felt, right? I felt like, I am not overseeing a group of people. I am not, I don't have a team that reports to me. So how can I be a leader? And, like Susan said to me, she's like, well, you run a podcast, like you have this massive community. Like, how could you not be a leader? Like, you're affecting people, you're changing, like, you're teaching people, you're changing people's lives in a way. And it was like, oh, maybe I should do this, right? And I think, like,
yeah,
that's
or who is going to do it, right? If you don't do it, nobody else is going to do that because it's unique to you, right? So, yeah, Brian, I'll cutting off your time there. Sorry.
It's all good. So leadership to me as a definition is kind of an abstract thing. I've wrestled with defining leadership in my own way and not taking it from somebody else or regurgitating what other people say as far as leadership's definition is. So I actually don't have one because I'd like to be truthful with it and it come from me, and I don't have that. But I will have a quote actually from John Quincy Adams, which is a great summation of it. It's just not mine, right? If your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, and become more, you are a leader. And I feel that is a pretty sound definition of leadership. And I kind of view it as two paddles on a pinball game. I'm literally taking someone who's already amazing and I'm just bumping them down a road. That's all I'm doing. I'm just guiding them and fostering their aspirations in any manner or way that I can. And sometimes that's in the form of autonomy, empowerment, discipline, accountability. All of those things can be the guiding light, if you will, to lead people in a good direction, right? And I also like to encourage people to challenge things, challenge themselves, and challenge me. You don't hire smart, good people and then just tell them what to do. What point is that, right? I'm here for you to tell me everything you know, and all I do is guide that expertise, that knowledge, and that emotion. That's all I'm doing. So that's kind of my take on it. When I do have a definition of leadership, I'll be sure to share it with everybody.
Yeah, I feel like leadership can be so many things. So I feel like there's no definite explanation of what it is. So yeah, I agree with you on there, Brian. Well, that leads into our next question. So in your opinion, what is your leadership best practices and how do you lead your team to success? In what ways do you keep your team motivated?
I mean, there's a lot there, right? I think the first step is absolutely what Charlie mentioned, right? For me, the first step is belief. You have to believe that you're a leader. It doesn't matter what position you have. It doesn't matter if you have a team that reports to you, or you're just a solo contributor, or maybe you're just a solo consultant. Doesn't matter. You have people around you that you can affect. And then the second thing is just like, I think you need to lean into who these people are. Like, I think you need to lean into empathy. You need to build relationships and build rapport with other people. And the best technique for that is vulnerability, right? When someone asks you who you are, don't just list your resume out, because it doesn't build connection. It doesn't open up space for them to tell you anything. And so that's where I would start with that, is get to know your people on an individual basis, one-on-one. And, like it can be simple things, right? Like, you don't have to tell them your darkest secrets, but tell them like who you are. Like what Charlie said, I'm a mom, I have kids, I like to play basketball. Like, these are things that you can use that build connection. And that's where you're opening up space to have real conversations.
Yeah, I agree. That'd be my first tip there, is that just treating people with respect, making those connections, right? That's the probably the best thing you could probably do, or at least from my experience there, is that, like, I can't say how valuable just going in and saying like, hey, how was your evening, or like, what'd you get up to last night, right? Having those conversations with my team, right, just helps to foster that connection and build some of that almost like that genuine caring for them, right? The other things I would say too that I've found is like leading through example is a big thing, right? And kind of doing what you say. And then in addition to that is what the things that I've had, right, is that say you're not always going to be able to get everything done that they want you to achieve in that, but it's always about coming back and sharing that with them, right? And giving that feedback so that they know that you're not forgetting about them, or you're carrying their things forward. And then the other thing is I think it's just about being helpful, right? I think if you try to, in whatever ways you can, when you get asked, is that you go and you help and you try to remove those things. It's even kind of what Brian's talking about, of guiding the people, right? Is you're removing those obstacles. You're doing what you can in your power to make their job, or allow them to do their job in the best way possible, right? And then the other thing is, I would say recognition is a big one too, right? I know that once I heard from kind of one of my mentors that in kind of maintenance and engineering, that it's not always a rewarding job, because if you do things right, you're not going to hear anything about it. But if you do something wrong, you're definitely going to hear about it. And so there's not often times where you're going to see that recognition. So if you do that recognition, and it just has to be small things, the thank yous, the whatever, right? The bringing coffee and donuts, right? It's so valuable. So I'd recommend that you try to do those things to help build that engagement, or that leadership.
So I feel like I know y'all's answers because of the 12 weeks I spent with you through the Leadership Launchpad. But I'll say something that I do with my team is have regular check-ins. So once a week we have a call, and I do that for one, to keep me up to date on what's going on in the company. But the other part of that is to check in with them, to see their body language, to see how they're really doing. I also have them send in kind of a written, what did you do this week? And it's not to keep tabs on that. It's not like I am doing that to say, micromanage, or you should do better in these areas. It's a quick review of what they did in order to give them the ability to just be able to run what they're doing for the business. And then I get that little sense of, okay, I know what's going on. The business is okay. And I can kind of move forward in that, but giving them the opportunity to take that leadership role on for themselves. I love to do that, checking in with my people. Anytime that I can show up and be motivated first, right? So I think that's the biggest thing, is motivating myself to say, okay, like Garrett was saying, you can't just tell them what to do or let them just do everything. You also have to be actively participating and motivating yourself and your team by being present and being involved. And You know, that's not always easy to show up every single time, but that's a goal that I have. And I think that shows the leadership element.
Right on. Number one for me, know your team, know who they are. Everyone's familiar with managing by walking around. I do that all the time. I wander around. I go bother the PM guy and make him talk to me and tell me something cool. You know, I'll drive out to the end of the yard and be walking around looking at a machine and see the guy working on it and go pick his brain for 30 minutes. I mean, know your team. There's no better way to connect to somebody than actually being physically, emotionally, and presently engaged in what they are doing. I'm fortunate enough to where I have done and been in the role of 90% of the people that work for me. So if I go and I'm hanging out with a welder, I know I'm a welder. If I go work on a heavy piece of heavy equipment, I'm a heavy equipment mechanic, right? So it allows that connection to happen, and it makes it much stronger when they know you've been in their shoes. I'm not saying you have to be in their shoes, but I'm saying it's very beneficial. If you've never been in their shoes, ask them about their life, what they do. Be curious of what they are doing, even if you don't know. And it's okay to not know. Just because you're the boss doesn't mean you have to know everything. You have to be a better welder than the welder that works for you. It doesn't work that way. You know, you need to know your team, and you need to do everything. Well, sorry, I'm speaking of best practices. Show them through any way. Sorry, I'm getting excited. Show them in any way that you can that they are the reason that success is possible. They are the creators of the value. You are merely the one who sheds light on the value and helps them foster it. That's my thing, man. I mean, if you don't know the people who work for you, you need to reflect and really sit down and think about your leadership role. You have to know all of them. I travel around the country all the time, and I can name every person in every maintenance department in the role that they complete. And that's connection, and that's value.
That's awesome, Brian. I feel like you hit it on the head there, because I mean, it goes into our next question too, and I feel like you kind of answered it. But you know, as a leader and you're showing these leadership qualities, how do you pass on these qualities to your team so that they can take ownership and take action in ways that they can develop and build their own leadership skills in the workplace? So how do you pass that on? And then we'll go again with Rob.
So again, I mean, sorry. You want Rob to go, or you want me to go?
No, go.
Oh,
Go
okay.
ahead.
So again, knowing your people is one. I mean, but the actionable ways is communicate your thoughts and emotions honestly. For me, both at home and at work. That was something that Rob
Not just for you, for everybody.
For everybody. That was something that Rob and I worked on together. So, you know, and seek out and be receptive of feedback. You know, that's super important. You know, we all have a conscience, right? And we're all analyzing the things that we're doing in real time, but then we also reflect on them. Even if we're not consciously reflecting on them, we're thinking about them in some capacity. So if you go and you have a communication or an interaction with somebody and you feel it didn't go as though you wanted it to go, think about why it didn't go the way you perceived it to go. And then go to that person and see how it was registered with that person. So take the time to reflect, you know, on your perspectives and your emotions, and challenge your thoughts and ideas, and welcome others to challenge you as well. I can't stress that enough. Respectfully, of course, but you know, I always tell people, you tell me, I don't know. You're the expert. I'm not. I want to know. And I want to be receptive, and we should be receptive as leaders of those things, and take what people say as being valuable and being pertinent and paramount, and being able to use that information to better them, not you, them. So, yeah.
And that's
right,
and that's the thing, right? And I think there's a lot of things that Brian said there. I mean, all of it's amazing. And the thing, I just want to call back to what Garrett said, right, about living what you are and actually living yourself as a leader, or living as a leader, right? And I think what we see in our spaces so often is people stand up in front of us and they say, safety is number one. And then anytime you can compromise production for safety, they pick that choice, right? And that destroys every level of trust that you can possibly have. And I did a podcast with Clive Lloyd this week, and he's one of the forefront safety leaders in the world. And he said, was it trust arrives by foot and leaves on horseback? And it's true, right? Everything you do as a leader, people see you. People are watching. And if you're not in alignment with what you say you are supposed to be there for, what you say your values are, what you're communicating, you cannot function as a leader. You won't be effective because people will just lose trust in you. They won't listen to you. They won't follow you. And that's the first thing. And the second thing is like leadership to me, I think you have to just start off with yourself. Like you actually have to understand who you are and what your values are. And I cannot tell you, I can't say, Garrett, your values are this, Charlie, your values are that, Brian, your values are that. It's not up to me. It's up to each one of them to pick their own values and define their own values. And that may start off with, a therapist or a coach or something like that, but really understanding yourself as deep as you can is the best way to start your journey as a leader.
Yeah, can I piggyback off of that? I wrote down a couple of things about that, and it is really helping people on your team figure out who they are. So a lot of the times we do like a strengths finder and figuring out what your strengths are and work within those strengths. And for me, that helps them, look at their life, their role in the company, what can they contribute? And having that conversation, just asking a question, which one of these strengths do you want the world to see? Has really opened up that line of communication and how you can raise people up in the direction they want to go. Because like you said, Rob, like we don't know what type of leader that person wants to be. I mean, we barely know what kind of leader we want to be most of the time. But we have to reflect on that. And which I love that word, Brian, reminded me again of our group, reflecting on who we are as a leader so that we can lead others. So good. Go ahead, Garrett.
And I'm just gonna say I basically agree. Like I know, speaking for myself, like when we started that leadership launchpad project and we started digging into those beliefs, those values, and understanding like our emotions and that, I think right at the end I was saying, man, I didn't realize like how important that was to understanding how I wanted to be a leader, right? I remember one of the first conversations I had with you, Brian, we were talking about how it was about me figuring out my style of leadership and what that meant to me, right?
Yeah, I mean, we said you're not going to be Rob, and Rob's not going to be me, and I'm not going to be Susan, right?
Yeah, that's exactly how it was, right? And in that journey of digging into that stuff is I had no idea of how important that stuff was in terms of this leadership stuff. So I think you guys, all I can say is I agree with that, because having now done that work, right, is now like I've seen like how my leadership has just changed, knowing that information and understanding truly like what I do value. And right, it's almost just like it helps build that integrity piece of, right, you're doing the things that are important to you, right?
And you're authentic to who you are, Garrett, right?
Yep.
And it's like that's why the people on your team and the people at your organization are rallying behind you, is you're showing up for them in your own way, in your own authentic way. And that's why you've seen the shift that you've seen.
Awesome. Those are all great pieces of information. Let's get a little personal. I want to know your guys' like leadership journey. So, right now, what's your current mission? What you do, who you do it for, and the benefit that it provides. And how does that measure up to your vision? So the values you have, the beliefs, and what inspires you.
Charlie, go.
Oh, gosh. Well, I like to empower people and businesses. So there's a lot there. But we'll start with, developing people and helping them grow. I love to highlight people. And I think it comes down to that value of everybody is worthy and has great talent and gifts. and I like to showcase that. But what I have a mission to do right now is to allow people to use their voice, to have a seat at the table, to understand what they need in order to reach that success or their best selves. A lot of that work came from working on the Empowering Women conference and community, but a lot of that work came from working on myself. And so if I'm able to, be able to communicate with people, share their stories, and allow them to get the skills and develop those needs that they have, and be that person for them to, be their cheerleader and encourage them on, then I'm in my leadership space, and I'm having a great time doing that. So that's me in a nutshell. Empowering other people gives me great joy.
You do it well.
Thanks.
So I guess my current leadership role, big picture is, I try to align my maintenance team and program with host's ever-changing global and operational environment, right? And that starts with people and getting people to align with their values, and how our values can then symbiotically work together, and we can be one team that's bracing or planning or doing whatever for host in general, our company, maintenance wise, right? But as far as personally, the leadership thing that motivates me is, I kind of define it by a leader, but also just as a person in general, right? It's a moral obligation, in my opinion, as a human and as a leader, to want to better those around me. And you're the standard that you walk by, whether it be walk by as an example or literally walk by. Because if you walk by somebody suffering or failing, or you are suffering and failing because you're allowing it to happen. And that is in a nutshell, what personally motivates me to do those things is that, I mean, I can't sit idle by while things are wrong that I can change, avoidable things. I'm not okay with that. And if I can't do it, well, then I'm going to fail, and I'm going to have another door open up, and I'm going to try to jump through that door to solve the problem. Because Rob knows I love solving problems. But that's it in a nutshell. It's an obligation, in my opinion, to make sure that others are taken care of, and are put in positions where they can succeed and do the things that they need to do for them. And if I don't allow that, then I am failing. So in a nutshell, that's what it is.
Garrett, get in there.
Okay. So yeah, I guess I'd say like my current mission is really about what I would say is like empowering, impacting, and engaging my people. Because like what I want to do is really make the connections with them, right? And then so that they can unleash their potential and make the difference that I think we can for the business, right? Like basically at the end of the day, I just want to see, what I love to see is I love seeing my team grow and engaged, right? It's been a journey, right? Of coming into this role and then and seeing some team members that were disengaged, right? Wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, right? And that comes from, say, maybe some management or some leadership that's gotten them to this point of disengagement, right? And so what motivates me there is just trying to see the light almost basically come back in their eyes, right? At one time they had this energy, this engagement, we're coming up with these improvements, these ideas, wanting to make the place better, and along the way they lost that, and getting to see that come back is awesome, right? And I know these guys all know that, like, in terms of the vision, is like what I always say is like, I want to be that department that all the other people speak about, that they're like, oh, I want to be a part of that department just because of the culture and that. And often what I talk about it is that I think of it as like work family, right? Is that I want my team and everyone to just have each other's backs and think of each other as that work family, right? And when I talk about it, I get excited because I just love seeing when we're learning, we're growing, we're engaged, right? Just everyone is just more involved and just makes work more fun, right? You should be enjoying what you're doing, not coming to work and just getting a paycheck, right?
Yeah, and that's really my mission, right? And I think, like, for some of you, I mean, the people in the panel, you know my story, but I was one of those people, right? I got disengaged at work and I became depressed and whatever, like, and I had a lot of mental health problems with that. And that's kind of where I've gone with my mission is I have two podcasts, right? And one is targeted at human-centric leadership, and it's really this aspect of what Garrett's talking about, right? I have a dream that this world that we can go to work and we can be happy and we can be engaged and we can be seen as people at work. And I think that's achievable. And what I see in industry is that's not currently the norm. And so I think that that's the first thing. And that's where, you know, the leadership podcast and leadership programs targeted at. And the other aspect is the mental health side, which I see. And I see in mining, in oil and gas, in construction, in all these male-dominated industries that we work in, the suicide rates are 2 to 3 times higher than the national average. And the conversations that we're having around emotions don't exist. The conversations that we're having around asking for help don't exist. And basically, I see it as I'm willing to step up and talk about it. And I think, like, that's the opening the door for other people. And that's where my mission is I think that, you know, our space is a long way to go. And so someone's got to do it, right?
I love that. That's great. I feel like that we're opening up the conversation. Yeah, sorry, Brian, go ahead.
I was just saying, like, you know, Rob has been in their shoes, and, you know, it's, I think everyone here and most people watching here can say that, you know, they've been in that role. They've been a number and not a name. They've been ignored. They've wanted to change things and they didn't have an avenue or a voice to do so. So yeah, I mean, that's huge.
Yeah, I
So
love that.
if we can get to this question, I think it's a great question. So Robert asked in the chat, he said, how do you transition from being in the field as an engineer to becoming a leader without losing your values? And I kind of poked a little bit at this question, right? And it said, like, basically what he's saying is he thinks that you would lose your values because you get pressure from higher management to drive things that you don't believe in. Right. And these could be something like, you know, like, hey, change this out faster. I don't care if it's unsafe, like, get it done. Right. And I think, like, first off is I don't think that you should consider your values as, like, these things that can change. And I also don't think that you can allow someone else to dictate what your values are. I think that that's where you leave in these places where you do feel like these mental health struggles, or you do feel like you're not being seen. But I think there's also, like, a belief here that we're missing in the chat, right, is what leadership actually is. It's not a role, right? We started off this conversation with this. So it's not like because you become a manager or because you move to the head office doesn't make you a leader. It doesn't not make you a leader, right? You have to start off with the belief that you're a leader, and then regardless of what position you are, you can affect change around the people that you have. And you could be the janitor and be a leader. Like, we've seen it, right? And I'm sure Garrett and Brian and Charlie know people who are at bottom rungs of the organization that are more respected than the CEO. I know, I've been there. I've seen it in the workplace, right? And I think that that's what true leadership is.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, Rob. It's not about if you had to do something that was out of your control, that does not change your value. That is something that you can't control. And I think a lot of the times we see how it should be done, how it would be done better. And we can't make that happen because it's out of our control. But that doesn't reflect on who we are as a person and who we, you know, what our values are. So I just wanted to highlight or add to your comment there, Rob.
I love that. I love that.
And in those scenarios where you're giving or getting tasks or things that are out of your control, I don't know, you can still always go down kicking and screaming. So, there's always a choice. You always have a choice. And in the choice where Rob, you mentioned, change this out faster, it doesn't matter. Say no. Say no. What are they going to do? Fire you? Well, you shouldn't be working there anyway. It's that simple. Your values, your personal safety, your psychological safety, your physical safety, it doesn't mean anything to them. If it doesn't mean anything to them, then that company shouldn't mean anything to you. It's that simple. No, not doing it. And going from a field position to a management position, the biggest thing that I had to understand was that it ain't about me anymore. Plain and simple. Yeah, I'm cool. I can troubleshoot stuff and run around and get dirty and fix stuff in the middle of the night and be a hero. But as soon as you're a leader, that doesn't matter. It's about making sure that the people who are doing all the things you used to do are taken care of in more capacities and more ways than just they have a wrench than when they need a wrench. So sorry.
Absolutely. But I'll just say I agree with all that. And I know that what Charlie even said about that, controlling what you can control, that, so like I'll share that was a big thing for me, right? Is that it's the many times where I was going and I was trying to ask and make these improvements, right? I was going down, I was listening to the guys, I was like, oh man, we can fix this, right? And we were going there, and then I'm trying to convince leadership, and I'm getting a lot of no's, right? And at the end of the day, initially how I took that was basically like, is I started out by feeling like I was failing these people, right? But then through the work that we did in this course is what I realized is that at the end of the day, that's truly out of my control, and I got to just stick to what are with my values, right? And what I can control. So right, it comes down to, right, with the training budget thing, right, is that you can keep on asking, right? And I have no problem asking, and hopefully one day maybe it gets through to them, and at the end of the day I'm able to get that training for that one guy, and we do improve and we grow, right? And that control was, or understanding that was a big thing of that. It was more about being true to my values and my things, right? And then what Brian says about you have that choice is like, I would just say that just be true to yourself, right? Is that at the end of the day, another thing that I didn't realize is that you're going to feel way better about yourself if you're true to yourself, right? At the end of the day, you're not going to come home feeling like, frick, why did I make that decision? And right, when you're in alignment with those values and beliefs, right? And that even ties back to that, what we were talking about, how that's actually so important that you understand what those are, right? Because if you know what those are and you understand them, then it makes it so much easier in that situation to tell someone, no, I'm not doing that, right? And then it becomes out of your control, right?
Right. And you, like what Garrett's saying here is absolutely 100% true, right? And the thing is, one of Garrett's values is like continuous improvement and growth and learning and stuff, right? And Garrett continues to ask his leadership for budgets and for money to get training, and his guys trained, right? And they keep saying no. And it doesn't stop Garrett from asking, because he's living in alignment with his values. And then also Garrett pulled together a list of free resources, like the maintenance community and all these other websites and the podcast, and provided that as something that they can do for free, right? And so these are things that you can do because you have control over that. But the other thing, right, is people, I think you need to understand like what work actually is, right? You're trading your time for money, or you're trading your expertise and therefore your time for money. And there is a limit to how much you can take as a person, as an individual. And my dad said this to me when I was really struggling with depression, was no job is worth your life. And that's like something that has really stuck with me, is like, you have a choice. You may not have another job. You may not have, whatever. And like, you can put up with stuff for so long, but at some point, if they're continually asking you to do things that you don't feel are right, or they're not aligned with your values, you can quit your job and you can find a new one. Like, that is an option available to you, right? And it may not be easy, but it may not be an easy decision to make, but you can do it. And I think that that's something that you have to understand is like there are options out there that you can go down that doesn't lead you to just, working in a place that doesn't value you at all.
And on top of that too, Rob, is, aligning your values and being true to those values builds your confidence. And it also allows other people to see you confident as a leader. And when people see confidence in others, that instills more leadership, right? They view that's a further binding agent of leadership. And they know that if you are going to align with your values, that they should align with their values. And that's leadership in a whole, right? Is that they're aligning with their values, and now you're creating a chain of leaders. And we are stronger together than we are individually, right? So yeah, leadership, that confidence is just the force multiplier, right? And people, the credibility and the trust and the openness and connection that you get by standing up for yourself and for others is unspeakable. I've had managers literally, when they first met me stand up to another boss in protection of them in situations, and afterwards they go up and they come up to me and they go, "Wow, you stood up for us." I said, "That's my job." They go, "Well, no one did that for us before. They would just throw us under the bus." And then it goes back to the whole thing. It ain't about me.
Yeah.
So.
Love that. Just to kind of piggyback off of that, I was thinking about what G.I. said, that at any point in your role, you can become a leader. It does not matter what your title is. But with that, how do you deal with conflict in different leadership styles? So with whoever you are dealing with in that moment, how do you as a leader yourself, meet in the middle with somebody else who doesn't have the same practices, values as you?
Charlie, kick us off.
I was going to say that's one of the hardest questions, but if you do that work, if you do that work on yourself, then you're able to do that. And I think we've touched on it so many times about learning your team, learning your community that you're in, what they're like. And I do believe that there is different leader styles. And if you know what yours are, then you're going to have to research the other ones and figure out how to work together with people. One of my favorite things about working with my husband in our business was that it taught me how he wants to work. I would say I'm a salesperson, he's in marketing, and they're just two separate mindsets. But it allowed me to grow. It allowed me to take time to organize things and have a process that is not really, I just want to come here and talk, right? But it allowed me to understand this is what he needs in order to be successful in his position. And so taking that and looking at it, and I use him as an example because it's both in your personal life and in your work life. We've talked about it so many times. It's about humans. It's about, reading their emotions. And I think that we touched on this earlier. Brian did, I wrote it down. That emotion and seeing how you react to something, you can also read how somebody else is reacting to you. And I think that's really important in understanding, okay, I might need to let that person cool off a minute so we can actually have a discussion. So I think just reading people, which is my favorite thing to do. So
I think, go ahead, Rob. Go ahead.
No. I was just gonna say, it's like a lot of us, and we're seeing this stuff in the chat, right? Like Mark and Edward are talking about not being seen at work, right? And even Mark is saying that he's withdrawn and he's gotten checked out from his job because he doesn't feel valued. And I think like I've been there, right? And Garrett's team has been there. And I think where we need to start here with as leaders is with empathy, right? And I think people who are high up in an organization now, they've come up primarily through the old school type of leadership. They've come up through these command and control, fear-based leadership styles. And they're going to be unwilling to change because they were successful in the old way. And so if we start with understanding that and we start with empathy, that's where we can start having that conversation instead of what we're doing right now, which is basically like, these are bad people. They're not listening to me. And therefore I'm out, like I'm done. And I think that's the biggest thing first, right? Is if we come at them and we attack, they're going to attack back. And this is what Charlie's talking about with reading emotions, right? And if we can come at them and say, hey, you know, like, I understand that, you know, this is how you believe something. And, you know, I just wanted to see if we can talk about maybe a different way. Then you can start to have a conversation that's actually like seen versus just an emotional no. And that's where we're at, right? Is, you know, we see that across the world right now is we have extremes left and right, and we're not able to have a real conversation. And if we can start by having those real conversations and start with empathy, then we can get somewhere and we can hear each other.
Yeah, they're not bad people just because they disagree with you.
That's right. Discourse is important, right? It helps everybody. And I think Abraham Lincoln said, like, when he goes into a negotiation, he spends a third of the time thinking about what he's going to say and 2/3 of the time thinking about what they're going to say. You know, and when we talk about this group, all of us, when we talk about knowing your people, I would further expand it and say, you know your enemy. I don't actually mean enemy, but, you know
Operations.
Yeah, bingo. Know others in your organization who may be roadblocks in certain things. Know them. Find common ground. Be cordial. I mean, there have been people to this day that I don't like, but I have to work with them because it's beneficial for what we all want, right? And I always go into those conversations, like Charlie said, reading body language, how are they feeling? Sometimes I'll walk up to them and just know, like, I'm not talking to you today. I'll try another day, right? But then there's other days where, you know, you're BSing, you know, you've just gotten out of a meeting, maybe the meeting's hanging out, some people are hanging out, you go up to that person and you strike up a very cordial, educational, formal, informal conversation. And then you can start to work your way into understanding or trying to, I don't like to say leverage, but, you know, get your ideas out there and see how receptive they are of those ideas. So it's important to not only to know everybody in your organization. You know, I've had pain points with certain people, and fortunately for me, that pain point was recognized by a lot of other people, and it was taken care of, you know, a lot easier, right? But yeah, that's very important. You know, is know everybody, even if it's people you don't want to be around. Know them, keep them close, understand them, understand what makes them tick, understand what's in it for them, and then play to the things that's in it for them that are also mutually beneficial for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that stuff, because, like, for example, even what Rob was saying is that about them having come up with these certain things, right? Is it just takes patience and then understanding, right? Exactly what Brian's saying is what you do with your people, do it with your bosses and stuff like that, right? Is if you have those conversations and you start to understand them, then you'll have better perspective on where they're coming from, right? I know, actually, in my experience is that that I had an event where me and my boss, we were in a meeting, we were getting yelled at basically. And what I said afterwards is, when we came out there, right, is that there was some safety things that got brought up. And what I said to him at the time is, like, man, I appreciate what you do, man. Like, I know that I don't see the half of it because you shield me from it. Right. And then I saw literally from that instance, like a flip, right? He was having more of these conversations with me about some of this hop stuff that we're trying to push at work. Right. And he started asking about it and got to the point where now the safety manager has given him a book on this hop stuff for him to read. Right. So it's one of those things of, right, sometimes, right, you might not actually have the full perspective of that person, right? But having those conversations and just being, again, that genuine person to have in those conversations is going to give you insights to better understand them and better develop that relationship, so that maybe you do get seen and you do you start to make that relationship that people are treating everyone like people, right?
Before we're a lot more similar than we let on, right? And I had a conversation literally this morning with a friend of mine, and he works as a therapist at an eating disorder clinic in Boston. And we've talked about my mental health with him, and he said to me this morning, he's like, you know, I'm treating this girl, she's 20 years old, she has an eating disorder, and she's like super meek, small girl, and she is so similar to you because everything on the inside is like wildly similar, right? And like I'm this guy, I'm 6'2", 200 something pounds, like, you know, athlete, whatever, and it's like I am very similar to like someone who's basically the opposite looking than me, right? And I think that's the thing, is a lot of people out there, like every facility I've ever been to says we're different than every other one, and yet the problems are all the same because people are roughly all the same. Yeah, we look different, but what's on the inside is very much similar. And I think that's the key, is if we can all find common ground with people we hate, we can find common ground with people we love. That's just what it is. We're all similar. And so it's find that common ground, and then you can start to open up space for realness, authenticity.
Yeah, that's nice. We do have, we're just at the end of our time, but there was a question that came in from Robert. And he asked, you know, how do you lead change in a team where one or two members are completely against the change, no matter which angle you come at them, and it may negatively influence the rest of the team?
Brian, go for it. Brian, go for it.
Make them in charge of the team. Make them in charge of the change. Let them get their ideas out there and lead the charge of change. And then go
That's
from there.
awesome.
Try that.
That was good.
Awesome.
I'm sorry. That was so good.
Quick and easy.
Make them the leader.
Cool.
We're done. Next
yeah,
question.
So we're just at
Moving on.
Very good there. Okay, so let's just end it with this last question. What is your one piece of advice for someone who's preparing to move into the leadership role or just starting a new leadership role in their organization?
Garrett.
Okay, so I guess my piece of advice would be, I feel like it's the same thing that we've been talking about this whole time, right? Is that is basically just treat your people with respect, compassion, and show up with that passion, right? If you're trying to engage your people and you're listening to them, you're making those connections, and you're just being your genuine self, right? That's going to develop those relationships that you need to grow as that leader and become that leader for your team, right? Again, that ties back a little bit into understanding those values and beliefs from you, right? If you do that, though, I think you're ahead of the game by just doing that. It seems simple, but right, obviously it's not that simple because we're in these organizations that are like this, right? So that would be my biggest piece of advice.
I would say to invest in yourself so that you know how to invest in your team. I think a lot of the work that I've done is understanding myself a lot better. And I can see where there's times where I'm harsher maybe on myself in some areas, and I'll be harsher on my employees in those areas. So understanding that and figuring out, you know, more about how to be the leader you want to be. So I want to say how to be a leader because we all are leaders, and there's so many leaders on this call right now. But believing in it, investing in yourself, and you know, time with yourself. So when I say invest, we talked about time earlier. Like spend time doing things to learn, you know, your values and what's important to you, and what type of leader you want to be.
Aside from all the great things that Charlie, Garrett, and Rob are going to say, I'm going to take a trippier approach to this. So I think it's very important to know and to understand that every person is interacting, perceiving, experiencing the world around them differently than you are. And that's a beautiful thing. And it's important to try to understand that view and seek to know them and their unique experience. And in doing that, they will start to see how their unique experience can better them in their organization or your organization or as a person or whatever. And that takes time, and it takes vulnerability, and it takes communication, and it takes openness, and it takes time. But don't forget that if I look at a 3412 engine and Rob looks at a 3412 engine, we're not seeing the same thing. And that's amazing. That's the best thing in the world, because that difference is amazing. And as you as a leader, you need to recognize those differences, and you need to elaborate on them and know them and leverage them and communicate them and bring them into light. So that would be my advice. We can get into all the other stuff, but fundamentally, that is what I believe.
You're talking about beliefs and mindset, so we're getting there. Yeah, I mean, for me, to be honest, I don't even fundamentally like the question, right? And I think that's the first step, is like, leadership's not a role. It's about a responsibility that we undertake to show up for ourselves and the people around us in the best way possible. And that's where I want to start people with. It doesn't matter. Just start believing and take the choice and take the responsibility of being a leader. And that will change how you show up. It'll change not really who you are, but it'll change you in a way. And then you can start going from there and see where it takes you.
Yeah, I love all of that. Thank you guys so much. We're just at the end of our time. I want to thank everyone for joining our panel discussion today, and for really all of our panelists here for going above and beyond and, you know, sharing your inspiring words to our group here and our wider community. So yeah, I love learning about your experience and, you know, how leadership has brought you far in your life so far. But for now, for the rest of our attendees, feel free to head over to the community Slack. We have our next event on the schedule. We'll be hosting our virtual industry booths and LinkedIn headshots. If you have any more questions, we'll be starting a thread in the Slack community for our panelists here today. So we'll move the conversation over there. But for now, thank you guys. We'll see you soon.
Thank
Bye.
you. See ya.
Thanks, everyone.